You wanted to know where the ship has been, so now you'll find out.
There are few films that manage to crawl under your skin quite like Event Horizon. Released in 1997 to tepid box office numbers and even chillier critical reception, Paul W.S. Anderson's bleak sci-fi horror was dismissed by many at the time as a derivative, over-the-top oddity with delusions of grandeur. And yet, nearly 3 decades later, the film has undergone an undeniable re-evaluation. What was once considered a mess is now hailed as a cult masterpiece, one of the most visually arresting and thematically disturbing films of its era. During a time where science fiction was split between sterile optimism and mindless spectacle, Anderson's film took a hard left into the void, melding the gothic dread of The Shining and Hellraiser with the hard vacuum of outer space. It asked questions most mainstream sci-fi wouldn't touch. What lies beyond the boundaries of human understanding? What happens when our greatest technological achievements open doors we were never meant to walk through? And what if the universe itself was not indifferent, but actively malevolent?
Well, thank you for that scientific analysis, Mr. Smith.
At the center of this descent into madness is the Event Horizon itself, a starship that disappeared years earlier, only to re-emerge near Neptune with no crew and a distress signal that sounds more like a tortured scream. A rescue crew, accompanied by the ship's original designer, is sent to investigate. What follows is not merely a haunted house in space, but a psychological crucible, where fear, grief, and guilt are weaponized by something beyond comprehension. The ship doesn't just respond to human emotion, it feeds on it, twists it, and eventually devours it. And that's precisely where the Warhammer 40k comparisons become more than just superficial. Everything about Event Horizon feels like it could have been extracted straight from the darkest chapters of that universe. The ship itself might as well be a chaos-tainted space hulk drifting out of the Eye of Terror without a Geller field. The hallucinations, the whispers, the slow psychological corruption of the crew, all of it mirrors what happens to those who foolishly tamper with the warp or heed the call of the Chaos Gods. If the Imperium of Man had a cautionary tale about unchecked science, hubris, and the unshielded mind of the human psyche, Event Horizon would be the visual instruction manual. And that's what makes the film so powerful. Not just its shocking imagery or relentless tension, but the mythic weight behind it all. It taps into the same themes that define grim dark science fiction, that the universe is not only uncaring, but hostile, that knowledge can damn you, and that in the cold vacuum of space, the only thing darker than the stars is the human soul. In many ways, it was ahead of its time. In others, it was simply too raw, too grim, too unapologetically hellish to be accepted by the masses.
And the scenes we cut out were primarily as well related to kind of the visions of hell, the experiences that the crew of the Lewis and Clark had on the Event Horizon. For me, though, it was truly disturbing, and it kind of informed their exploration of the event, and I think would have unsettled the audience even more. Although in retrospect, the audience was so unsettled anyway. They were terrified when our heroes were exploring the Event Horizon.
Hey guys, what's happening? Niyat here with Film Comics Explained, and today we're breaking down the production history, the story and characters, as well as some answers as to what the hell happened to the Event Horizon. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification icon to stay up to date on all the latest content, and click the like button to help the PC algorithm gods. Also, if you'd like to make a suggestion on what you want me to cover next, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments below.
So, we went to our first test, and we had a lot of horrific, gory sequences in there. The maggots around the legs, JD being skinned alive. And what we found was the audience just couldn't, it was just too much. It undermined the drama.
The production history is as chaotic, haunting, and fractured as the film itself. Fitting, really, for a movie about a starship that quite literally goes to hell and returns mangled beyond recognition. What unfolded behind the scenes was not merely a troubled shoot or a few creative disagreements, it was a race against the clock, marred by studio panic, brutal editing mandates, lost footage, and a vision that was ultimately undermined by the very system that commissioned it. And yet, in spite of this, or perhaps because of it, Event Horizon emerged as something rare, a flawed, compromised film that somehow still drips with dread, style, and cosmic horror. The story begins in the mid-1990s, when Paramount Pictures was fresh off the success of Mortal Kombat, a modestly budgeted video game adaptation directed by then-rising British filmmaker named Paul W.S. Anderson. Though Mortal Kombat didn't exactly wow critics, it made money and proved that Anderson could deliver spectacle on time and on budget, qualities highly prized by studios. Eager to capitalize on this, Paramount offered Anderson a 3-picture deal, but rather than jump into another safe, crowd-pleasing IP, Anderson chose a very different path for his second feature film, a horror movie set in space infused with Lovecraftian terror, Catholic imagery, and deeply nihilistic overtones. Working with screenwriter Philip Eisner, Anderson developed Event Horizon as a kind of The Shining in space, a slow-burn descent into psychological and metaphysical horror with heavy influences from Hellraiser, Alien, and Solaris. Eisner's original script was more of a haunted ship mystery with subtle supernatural elements, but Anderson, eager to push boundaries, retooled it into something far more visceral. Drawing inspiration from Clive Barker's depictions of pain as pleasure and hell as an ever-present dimension of suffering, Anderson reimagined the Event Horizon not as a malfunctioning vessel, but as a conduit to a dimension of pure, malevolent chaos, what one could easily interpret as a cinematic representation of the warp from Warhammer 40k. The science fiction element, the gravity-dry folding space-time, was essentially a high-concept excuse to explore existential dread, trauma, and the unknowable horrors of a Lovecraftian universe.
We got together and had a meeting, and it was a kind of, I think he'd seen Hellraiser and spoken to Clive about a couple of things, and he was enthusiastic for us to get involved in some of the more deaths and some of the more complicated gigs on it.
We had a brief from Paul Anderson to construct something, or give the image of Sam Neill when he becomes... it's hard to describe because everyone calls it the Weirbeast, but I'm not sure that was ever the right name. I know everyone calls it that, but it was more the dark side of Sam, really. He had to have carved things into his face that we don't understand, into his whole body, and I think that was just the bad bit of Sam coming out. He was taken over, who knows, he's the devil. No one's ever understood, but we had to give a visual.
The casting of Event Horizon is one of its strongest assets. Lawrence Fishburne was brought on as Captain Miller, the moral center of the crew. At the time, Fishburne was transitioning from character actor to leading man and brought a commanding gravitas to the role. Sam Neill, fresh off Jurassic Park, was cast as Dr. Weir, a choice that added layers of credibility and unexpected menace. Neil's ability to oscillate between earnest scientist and unhinged madman gave the film one of its most iconic performances.
Kathleen Quinlan, who we'd seen in The Doors, that's why we hired her. We thought she was very strong in that. Interestingly, she had a young son in real life, and her character has this child, and she'd had to leave her husband and her child in America to do this film in England, which was echoing her character in the film. So I think she brought a lot of that real life feeling into her part. I mean, I really, really think you feel for her when she's missing her child and she's feeling guilty about her child, and she very cleverly brought that in there. And I think the cast everybody has something you're guilty about. Everyone has done something horrific, and I think they all tapped into that a little bit.
Kathleen Quinlan played Lieutenant Stark with quiet resilience, while Jolie Richardson as Peters brought emotional vulnerability that contrasted effectively with the brutality of the ship. Jason Isaacs, in an early but memorable role as DJ, the ship's medical officer, injected clinical cynicism and dread. Richard T. Jones as Cooper added levity and physicality. Sean Pertwee as Smith and Jack Noseworthy as Justin rounded out the cast with performances that emphasized the ensemble nature of the crew, giving us the illusion that these were people with relationships before the ship tore them apart.
It's an unusual film, and it does have a quality, I think, that is just a little bit edgy, a little bit different, and visceral. I think's exciting, and
I think the film deals with a lot of dark subject matter, and it has a real kind of religious undercurrent to it. And I think those kind of things don't date. The idea was, although it was set on a spaceship, what we were making essentially was a haunted house movie and a movie about hell. And I think in that way it wasn't science fiction, and it was dealing with darker, deeper issues. And I think those issues are still as relevant now as they were then.
The production design of Event Horizon was led by Joseph Bennett, and it remains one of the most visually striking aspects of the film. The titular ship, the Event Horizon, was designed as a Gothic nightmare, a floating cathedral in space. Its corridors were inspired by Notre Dame's vaulted architecture, complete with ribbed archways and jagged steel surfaces meant to evoke a fusion of the mechanical and the medieval. The gravity core, the ship's hellish heart, resembled a gyroscopic Cenobite altar, pulsing and alive, with rotating rings covered in spikes. The drive room itself was modelled after a cruciform layout, reinforcing the religious iconography that laces the film.
The set in which there is the giant orb spinning, that was a huge set to build. That took about 4 months. We had masses of scaffolding. I think, the thing about Paul, most of Paul's films, everything's big. So, it may look like a small idea on the page, but it just goes big. And the challenge as his producer is to try to give him the bigness, but keep it on budget. That was a real challenge on that film. It was very complicated.
The Lewis and Clark, by contrast, was grittier and more functional, closer in design to the Nostromo from Alien. This contrast helped emphasize the uncanny atmosphere of the Event Horizon itself, which always felt wrong, as though it wasn't built so much as summoned. Many of the sets were physically constructed to allow for in-camera effects and long tracking shots, which Anderson favoured. The production team worked on a soundstage at Pinewood Studios in England, and the detail put into the corridors, airlocks and chambers was extensive, lending a tangible, lived-in quality to the film's environments.
But we had enough, they had enough stages for us, particularly the Bond stage. We needed a very big stage because the scene in the Daylight Space Station where you are in on Sam Neill in his little cubicle and he's shaving. We pull out. That was a massive shot. It required like a 60-foot track, revealing that he's in space.
The film's visual effects were a blend of practical and early digital work. While some of the CGI has aged poorly by today's standards, many of the film's more grotesque moments were accomplished practically, thanks in large part to prosthetics and animatronics crafted by Image Animation, the same effects team behind Hellraiser. The infamous blood orgy video log sequence in particular featured full-body prosthetics, dismembered limbs, and imagery that rivaled Clive Barker's most extreme visions. Adrian Biddle, the cinematographer behind Aliens and The Princess Bride, brought an expert eye to the proceedings. His use of deep shadows, saturated lighting, and diffused halos around the gravity core created a visual grammar that constantly reminded the viewer that something malevolent was present. The red, green, and blue lighting schemes helped delineate reality from hallucination and evoked both the sacred and the profane.
In terms of which sequence I'm most proud of, the opening shot of the Event Horizon when the camera rakes in across it and the sunlight filters through the gantry work, I think visually is one of the best shots. In fact, though, I think the most impressive work is a lot of the effects shots that perhaps the audience wouldn't notice or wouldn't be sure whether it was shot for real or CG. I particularly like a very short sequence when Miller is first exploring the Event Horizon and is startled by the CG glove. I think a lot of the lighting in that, which was done in CG, works very, very well. And likewise when they're first in the main corridor and there's a camera shot with the water bottle that's been shattered and there are little bits of ice hanging in the air and the torchlight that comes up through that. Those are the kind of details, I think, that really make a huge difference into how well the computer-generated objects are integrated into live action.
The score, composed by Michael Kamen in collaboration with electronic group Orbital, was a deliberate departure from traditional orchestral sci-fi scores. Kamen's brooding strings were infused with Orbital's synthetic beats to create a soundscape that felt disjointed, chaotic, and oppressive, heightening the tension and contributing to the film's unique atmosphere. The sound design itself was also carefully curated. The ship emitted low-frequency tones and rhythmic pulses, almost as if it was breathing or whispering. The infrasound and reversed audio clips were inserted into ambient noise to subconsciously unsettle the viewer, a trick borrowed from experimental horror films and real-world psychological studies.
And we mixed the sound for the film the night before we flew to America. And the mixing studio we were in basically broke down. So we couldn't finish the sound mix properly. So we went there with a movie that was, wasn't edited properly. The sound mix was bad. And in a horror movie, the classic thing, but if you turn the volume down on any scary movie, it's not scary anymore. I mean, you can sit through any scary scene, and if you don't have the music and you don't have the sound effects and you don't have the build, it just doesn't frighten you.
We got involved in the Event Horizon through Jeremy Bolt, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Jeremy Bolt.
Jeremy and Paul Anderson. I don't know, I you know, who knows what someone's motives are, but he just said, I'd like you to sort of work on this with Michael Kamen a bit, to just give it that sort of, give it a different edge, do you know what I mean? I suppose it's that sort of electronic sort of element, you know.
They obviously had never done the score for a movie before, so the studio felt very uncomfortable with giving, you know, a group like that the score of a major film. So what we did was we married them with Michael Kamen, who was a much more established composer, to try and get what I thought was a very successful and an unusual mix of kind of modern sounds with the more kind of classical score that Kamen provided.
With a budget of $60 million, respectable but not excessive, Paramount fast-tracked the project, partly because James Cameron's Titanic was facing delays and Event Horizon was needed to fill a release window in August 1997. That decision, seemingly minor at the time, would prove disastrous. The schedule was merciless. Anderson was given just 4 weeks for post-production, a staggeringly short turnaround for a visual effects-heavy horror film. To put that into perspective, most major studio films have at least 10 to 12 weeks of post-production before the first test screening. Anderson had a month to deliver the final cut. And what he delivered shocked even the studio. The original cut of Event Horizon clocked in at around 130 minutes with an R rating that pushed boundaries. This version contained extended sequences of hallucinations, additional character development, and most notoriously, a longer, more horrifying version of the infamous blood orgy scene. Flashes of footage depicting the ship's original crew tearing each other apart in a frenzy of mutilation, impalement, and violence under the influence of the dimension beyond the Event Horizon's gravity drive. Anderson and editor Martin Hunter had stitched together this version with raw energy and uncompromising horror, hoping the studio would trust their vision. They didn't. Paramount executives were horrified, not just because the film was gory, but because it was relentlessly bleak. The mood was oppressive, the violence was obscene, the pacing was glacial in places, and with the studio's release deadline immovable, they issued a mandate. Cut the film down to under 100 minutes, trim the violence to avoid an NC-17, and make it more quote-unquote accessible. The result was a butchered final cut, running just 96 minutes, with entire character arcs truncated, key exposition removed, and multiple effects sequences deleted altogether. The blood orgy scene, intended as a visceral centerpiece, was trimmed to a few seconds of incomprehensible flashes. The rest was left on the cutting room floor, quite literally. And in a tragic twist befitting the movie's own themes of loss and destruction, most of the original footage was never properly archived. It was stored on VHS work prints and in salt mines in Transylvania. Yes, really. But by the time anyone tried to mount a director's cut in the early 2000s, the material had degraded or vanished entirely. Despite the ruthless editing, the rushed release, and a disinterested marketing campaign, Anderson's vision somehow still manages to bleed through the final product. The ship itself, designed with a grotesque blend of brutalist engineering and religious architecture, became iconic. The performances, particularly from Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill, were elevated by their total commitment to the material, grounding the absurdity with psychological weight. And the lore, the implication of a sentient ship corrupted by exposure to a malevolent dimension of chaos, still resonates deeply, especially with fans of cosmic horror. Over time, Event Horizon found new life. Through word of mouth, DVD sales, and internet film communities, it was re-evaluated as a misunderstood gem. Fans of Warhammer 40k saw it as the closest Hollywood has ever come to capturing the essence of warp travel gone wrong. Horror aficionados praised its atmosphere and grotesque aesthetic. Sci-fi lovers appreciated its boldness, its commitment to dread, and its refusal to offer any easy answers. But what makes Event Horizon's production history so fascinating isn't just how badly the studio mishandled it, it's that, even in its damaged state, the film remains powerful. It's a rare example of compromised cinema that still has a soul, ironically fitting for a movie about a ship that loses its own.
After only about 4 weeks of editing, we tested the film, and it was gruesome, and all the people from Paramount, I think, were just really shocked by what they saw.
People were fainting.
I mean, they were. I mean, and It was horrible. We thought it was awesome. Yeah, we thought it was great. And so anyway, they didn't like the movie at all, and they wanted the movie trimmed down. They thought it was way too long, and they wanted a lot of the violence taken out. At one point, they asked whether it could be a PG-13, which when you see the movie is like, I don't know.
No way that could happen.
It could have been a short film, I guess.
In the year 2040, humanity planted its boot prints on the Moon and Mars to establish colonies. But technological progress comes with a price, and nothing proves that more than the disastrous maiden voyage of the Event Horizon, a top-secret experimental starship that disappeared beyond Neptune. The loss became the Titanic of space disasters, filed under Don't Ask, Don't Tell by Earth authorities. 7 years later, in 2047, the ship inexplicably reappears, idling creepily in Neptune's orbit. Before the film plunges into the abyss, it introduces us to a crew that feels refreshingly grounded, competent, distinct, and emotionally complex. Each character serves a clear role within the mission, but more importantly, each carries their own psychological weight, creating a dynamic ensemble that elevates the film's descent into madness. The first character we meet is Dr. William Weir, the brilliant but emotionally repressed physicist who designed the Event Horizon's experimental gravity drive. Cerebral and aloof, Weir represents the cold ambition of scientific advancement, fascinated by breakthroughs but disconnected from their real-world consequences. He's the wild card of the mission, intellectually invaluable but emotionally brittle. Sam Neill masterfully walks the line between detached scientist and emotionally frayed man of secrets. Even early in the film, his performance carries a subtle sense of dread, as if something within him is already unraveling. It's restrained, intelligent, and unnervingly layered.
I miss you.
At the center is Captain Miller, the commanding officer of the Lewis and Clark rescue vessel. Calm under pressure, decisive in crisis, and utterly focused on protecting his crew, Miller is the kind of leader who demands competence. He's a man of action, someone you trust when everything goes sideways, but beneath the commanding presence lies a man who's had to make difficult choices that led to the deaths of previous crewmates. Lawrence Fishburne brings his signature gravitas and quiet intensity, crafting a no-nonsense leader whose sense of responsibility borders on tragic nobility. He plays Miller with a quiet storm simmering beneath the surface, never melodramatic, always grounded.
Rescue the crew, salvage what's left of the ship. The crew is dead, Doctor. Your ship killed them.
Lieutenant Stark, Miller's second-in-command, is a rationalist and strategist. Cool-headed, observant, and often the first to connect the dots, she provides a stabilizing presence amid growing tension. While others are quick to act or react, Stark watches and deduces, offering clarity when the unknown begins to take shape. Kathleen Quinlan imbues the character with quiet strength, someone who sees more than she says and keeps a level head as tension builds. Her performance may not be flashy, but it's indispensable, giving the film a stable presence amid the spiraling chaos.
I ran the bioscan with the DNA RNA filters. The results were bioreadings
of an indeterminate origin, yes, I know.
I'm saying that this ship is reacting to us and the reactions are getting stronger.
What are you telling me, that this ship is alive?
You wanted an answer, and it's the only one I've got.
DJ, the trauma doctor aboard the ship, is soft-spoken and composed, most of the time, with a quiet intensity that suggests both empathy and depth. Though clinical by nature, he harbors a deeper understanding of psychological trauma, which becomes increasingly relevant as the crew faces more than just physical danger. Jason Isaacs plays a role that feels remarkably restrained given his flair for flamboyant villains. Here he plays it cool and clinical, his detached demeanor laced with an undertone of dread. Isaacs excels at conveying intelligence and sensitivity with the slightest shift in tone or glance, and DJ's quiet complexity is a testament to that subtlety.
If what Dr. Wade tells us is true, this ship has been beyond the boundaries of our universe, of known scientific reality. Who knows where it's been?
Smith, the ship's pilot, is blunt, sarcastic, and not one for subtlety. A true blue-collar realist, Smith doesn't care for theoretical mumbo-jumbo or anyone who talks in riddles. He's a skilled pilot, a practical thinker, and someone you want around when it's time to act. His distrust of Weir is immediate, and not without reason. I think Sean Pertwee gives one of the film's most grounded performances. He's sharp, blue-collar, and has no patience for anything outside of his job description. Pertwee's delivery is filled with raw frustration and practical bluntness, offering both comic relief and a healthy dose of skepticism. You believe this man flies ships for a living, and by the end of the movie, you believe he's had enough of this one.
Jesus.
Mr. Smith, are you up for a flyby?
Yes, sir. Yes, I'd love to. You should go very carefully here. That is not a load-bearing structure. Is now, Doctor.
Cooper, the rescue technician, brings levity to the crew with his wit and confidence, but don't mistake him for just comic relief. Underneath the banter is a highly skilled operator who knows how to handle high-pressure EVA situations and isn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Richard T. Jones's charisma and confidence make Cooper feel instantly likable and real, but don't mistake the jokes for incompetence. He sells Cooper as someone whose optimism and street smarts are his survival mechanism.
Want some coffee? What about you, Stark? Would you like something hot and black inside you? Ooh, is that an offer?
It is not.
Peters, the medical technician, offers a warm maternal energy that balances out the intensity of the rest of the crew. She's empathetic, intuitive, and deeply human, a caregiver who brings emotional intelligence to a cold, mechanical environment. Her compassion is her strength, but also her vulnerability. Jolie Richardson's performance stands out for its humanity. Peters is a caregiver at heart, and Richardson plays her with eyes that constantly search for emotional connection in a place devoid of them. She brings a real pathos to a story that could have easily devolved into cold sci-fi abstraction. Lastly, we have Ensign Justin, the youngest member of the crew, working as an engineer and systems technician. Earnest and capable, Justin is curious by nature, a trait that makes him useful in tight technical scenarios. But his youth also sets him apart. He hasn't quite yet learned that in deep space, curiosity doesn't always end well. Jack Noseworthy plays Justin as wide-eyed but skilled. His subtle physicality and shifts in demeanor capture the fragility of someone not yet hardened by experience.
The dark inside me from the other place, it shows you things. Horrible things.
The crew is cranky, underslept, and unimpressed by Weir's attempts at small talk. They're told they'll be launching in 10 minutes, and if they don't want their bones turned into jelly by the 30 Gs of thrust, they need to climb into their water-filled stasis tanks.
Claustrophobic? Very.
Fast forward 56 days, the Lewis and Clark reaches Neptune, and Weir is the first to wake up. Or is he? He wanders the ship until he finds his dead wife Claire on the bridge, mournful and very much missing her eyeballs. She whispers that she's cold, then opens her eyeless sockets and stares into his soul. Weir screams, then properly wakes up, revealing it was all a nightmare, or a premonition, or both. It won't be the last time Event Horizon plays peekaboo with people's sanity.
Why aren't you on the bridge?
Do you mind if I get dressed first?
As a matter of fact, Lieutenant, I do mind if you get dressed first. Let's go, people!
Once everyone is awake, Weir is properly introduced to the Lewis and Clark crew. Most notably, medical technician Peters, a mother racked with guilt for leaving her paraplegic son behind for this mission, and Dr. DJ, a physician who clearly skipped the bedside manner course in med school.
You've been in stasis for 56 days. You're going to experience a little disorientation, you understand?
The crew is understandably confused when Weir explains they're not just salvaging a derelict ship, they're unearthing the truth behind one of the greatest cover-ups in human history. Contrary to official reports that the Event Horizon blew up due to a reactor meltdown, the ship was actually a prototype for faster-than-light travel. Its gravity drive worked by folding space-time in half and punching a hole through the fabric of reality itself by creating a temporary artificial black hole. The idea was to make interstellar travel instantaneous. The destination, Proxima Centauri. The result, total radio silence and a missing ship.
Ship doesn't really go faster than light. It creates a dimensional gateway. Now, the singularity.
Layman's terms.
Well, layman's terms, do you speak English?
Dr. Weir introduces the first major red flag, a distress signal recovered from the Event Horizon. This isn't your garden variety Mayday. It's a garbled cacophony of screams, shouts, and tortured wailing. When they isolate a human voice amidst the chaos, DJ, the crew's resident philosopher-surgeon, swears he hears Latin.
Liberate me something, I can't make out the rest.
Alarms blare as the Lewis and Clark approaches the orbiting hulk of the Event Horizon. A flyby reveals no signs of life, only ambiguity. Scans showing trace amounts of life on board only add to the confusion and push Captain Miller to authorize a boarding party. Miller checks out the medical bay, Peter heads for the bridge, Justin checks out the gravity drive, and Weir radios in to explain the ship's layout.
You still haven't seen any crew?
If we saw any crew, Doctor, you'd know it by now. Scanning for life readings.
The event horizon is divided into two major sections, the forward module housing the bridge and med bay, and the aft section housing the experimental gravity drive, connected by a corridor that can be blown apart in an emergency to turn the front into a makeshift lifeboat. Inside, the ship is an icebox. With artificial gravity offline, everything floats, including ominous blood droplets and a frozen corpse Peters finds drifting on the bridge. The corpse's eyes have been gouged out, which is neither normal nor encouraging. Meanwhile, down in the gravity drive chamber, Justin takes it upon himself to examine the ship's infamous experimental core, a spherical, spike-line metal orb that radiates do not touch energy. Unfortunately, the orb opens, revealing a shimmering liquid black void that sucks him in. A shockwave then blasts through the event horizon, rattling the structure and breaching the hull of the Lewis and Clark. Cooper reacts quickly, reeling Justin out, and though the boy's back is catatonic, while the Lewis and Clark is damaged. This forces Captain Miller to order the rest of the crew to abandon it and board the event horizon. With life support restored on the derelict ship, gravity and atmosphere kick in, and the crew finally walk the halls. But the blood-smeared walls and bone fragments on the bridge suggest that the original crew had a very bad time. What's worse is that the communication antenna is dead, cutting off any hope for calling for help, while oxygen reserves are limited, with only 20 hours of breathable air remaining.
We should be able to repair her, but it's going to take an awful lot of time, sir.
Negative. 20 hours, we run out of air.
Smith and Cooper begin external repairs on the Lewis and Clark, attempting to patch the massive hole in its hull. Justin, meanwhile, is technically alive, but utterly hollow. When the crew recaps what happened to him, Weir offers a scientific rationale that Justin could have entered a dimensional gateway created by the activated drive. But he also insists that this isn't possible, as a drive cannot activate itself, blaming gravitational distortions and optical illusions for what they saw and what damaged the Lewis and Clark. The others aren't buying it.
It was liquid, and the whole core just turned south.
It's just not physically possible.
The team inspects the drive, which now looks perfectly inert, as if nothing ever happened. But appearances can be deceiving, especially when your ship is drenched in blood and your physicist is acting increasingly cagey. Miller ultimately declares the gravity drive chamber is off limits, much to Weir's thinly veiled irritation. Back in the medical bay, Peters is diligently combing through the event horizon's corrupted logs when she hears something that doesn't belong here. She investigates, only to be confronted by deeply personal horror. Her son Denny, seated on a med bed, his legs mutilated and covered in lesions. It's the kind of scene that screams emotional bait, and yet it's haunting because it works. When DJ enters, the child vanishes, leaving behind no evidence, just Peters, shaken, and now with even less reason to trust what she's seeing.
We've reached safe distance.
This is John Kilpack, ship's captain.
And are preparing to engage the gravity drive.
She's not empty-handed, though, and managed to extract a partial video log from the day the Event Horizon embarked on its voyage. Weir recognizes the captain, John Kilpack, introducing the crew with all the professionalism you'd expect right before you crack open a portal to hell. Kilpack signs off with the Latin phrase,
Ave atque vale, hail and farewell.
From there, the footage quickly devolves into visual chaos, but the audio is unmistakable. It matches the original transmission, filled with screams and howls, forcing Peters to set about cleaning up the footage with filters. Then, because things are never quiet for long, there's a sudden power drain coming from the gravity core, forcing Miller and Weir to descend into the ship's bowels to investigate. Weir chalks it up to a short circuit and wanders into a claustrophobic tangle of maintenance tunnels. Meanwhile, in medical, Justin snaps violently out of his coma, convulsing and crying out.
Please come on. Who's coming? The dark.
Back in the core, things escalate. Weir is plunged into darkness, then spooked by the sudden appearance of his wife, eyeless, bloodied, and whispering for him to join her. Miller also witnesses a fire erupting from a pool of coolant, and from it rises the burning figure of a man he once knew. Understandably rattled, the crew regroups to make sense of the insanity. Weir reaches for the rational explanation, blaming hallucinations brought on by CO2 poisoning and latent psychological trauma. Conveniently, he emits his own vision. Of course, the rational Smith isn't having any of it. He snaps, blaming Weir's hubristic science experiment for everything. The death of the original crew, the damage to their ship, and the mind games plaguing them now. He's not entirely wrong, but the chaos doesn't help, so Smitty's restrained and reassigned to hull repairs with Cooper.
Just a ship. Do you understand? It's just a big hunk of metal. There's nothing odd going on.
Stark, ever the quiet observer, shares her hypothesis with Miller. The hallucinations are connected to the Event Horizon's inexplicable sensor readings. She believes the ship brought something back with it, a presence that's now reacting to and feeding off them. Meanwhile, Peters makes another pass through medical and discovers that Justin has vanished. Before anyone can panic though, the ship begins to shudder with a deep metallic banging. The crew races to the bridge to find the heavy door denting inward from repeated impact, as if something on the other side is trying to punch its way in. Weir, in a move equal parts scientific curiosity and death wish, approaches the door to open it, but Stark cuts him off. The pounding then stops as a new alarm blares, revealing that Justin has locked himself inside the airlock without a suit. Dazed but eerily lucid, he tells him the dark inside showed him horrible things and that he's not going back there. He's now determined to eject himself into space. As the procedure initiates, Justin snaps out of his trance, screaming for help. In a display of quick thinking, Miller manages to shove him back into the airlock chamber just in time, but not without cost. Justin survives, but he suffers catastrophic decompression trauma.
The ship's drive creates a gateway. To what?
I don't know.
I don't know is not good enough, Doctor.
By this point, any notion that this mission was salvageable has been well and truly obliterated. The ship is playing with them, preying on guilt, trauma, and memory. Something unnatural has come back from wherever the gravity drive took it, and it's no longer just whispering, it's manifesting.
Make it stop!
The Event Horizon was a marvel of 21st century engineering, representing humanity's most audacious attempt to conquer the final frontier. The implications were staggering. Instantaneous travel across light years, unbound by relativistic limitations. But in building this system, the designers unknowingly fashioned a key, not for some simple spatial shortcut, but for a door that should never have been opened. They had, in essence, constructed a machine that defied nature. When the Event Horizon activated the gravity drive in 2040, the ship vanished from our universe entirely and went somewhere else. A place where reality breaks, where time folds in on itself and causality dissolves. A dimension of raw entropy and sentient chaos. Scientifically, this place may be described as a non-Euclidean, non-temporal realm. A dimension of pure disorder, incompatible with the physical and moral structures we call life. It is not hell in the classical sense, but the term endures because no other word encapsulates the level of suffering, torment, and inversion there. This wasn't a place humanity had ever glimpsed before, and when the Event Horizon returned into our plane of reality, she was no longer a vessel, nor empty. The ship's interior had transformed. The walls wept blood, groans echoed from something responsive and sentient. The vessel now emitted constant low-frequency infrasound, corrupted and misaligned with human neurobiology. The sound unsettled, caused hallucinations, vertigo, and dread. The Event Horizon had been fundamentally altered, not spiritually possessed in the traditional demonic sense, but quantum entangled with the logic of that hellish dimension. Her architecture had absorbed the alien frequency of that place like a tuning fork humming with malevolent resonance and become a haunted cathedral, a blasphemous bridge, a living machine baptized in entropy. What she could now do defied conventional science. The ship had gained the ability to delve into the minds of her crew, peeling back the layers of trauma, regret, and shame, and manifesting them into hallucinatory and at times physically harmful experiences. The environment morphed, gravity shifted, fires broke out spontaneously, blood ran in reverse. These phenomena were expressions of the ship's mood, her will, her displeasure. And perhaps most disturbingly, the ship developed what could only be called a resistance to abandonment. Efforts to escape were thwarted. What then is the Event Horizon now? She is a conduit, a relic contaminated by another realm's physics, now functioning as a sort of dimensional infection vector. She no longer explores space but recruits victims for the dark dimension. She was designed as the pinnacle of human reason, a crowning achievement of science, but she returned as the herald of anti-reason. A haunted machine, baptized in suffering and forever tethered to a realm where time burns and thought screams. And the crew are finding out that she doesn't want them to leave at all.
Who knows where it's been, what it's seen, and what it's brought back with it.
With Justin rescued and barely clinging to life, the crew does what little they can. They place him inside one of the Event Horizon's gravity stasis tanks. Stark then delivers another ticking clock update. The ship only has 4 hours of breathable air remaining. Miller, trying to regain control of an increasingly uncontrollable situation, orders Peters to crack the logs wide open. He then turns to Weir for answers. Why the strange noises? Why did Justin try to kill himself after staring into the gravity core? What did Weir's miraculous project actually do? Weir fumbles for explanations, citing vague technical theories about gravitational distortion, space-time misalignment, and other jargon that explains absolutely nothing. When pressed about the ship's 7-year absence, where it went, what it saw, Weir astonishingly admits he has no idea.
There's a lot of things happening around here that I don't fully understand. I need time.
Miller then hears a voice calling his name, begging not to be left behind. Haunted and unraveling, Miller confides in DJ, finally naming the ghost that's been stalking him. Eddie Corrick, an officer from the Goliath, Miller's previous ship. When an oxygen tank ruptured, Miller saved 2 crewmen but left Corrick behind to be consumed by fire, something he's never told anyone before.
But this ship knew about it. It knows my fears. It knows my secrets.
DJ, growing more unnerved himself, admits he re-listened to the corrupted signal from the Event Horizon. Turns out he misheard the Latin phrase.
It's liberate tutte me, ex inferis. Save yourself from hell.
DJ essentially believes the ship went somewhere beyond human understanding and brought something back with it. As if on cue, Cooper chimes in with a rare dose of good news. Repairs on the Lewis and Clark are nearly done. But before anyone can breathe easier, Peters uncovers the full ship's log, a gift that keeps on giving. The footage is pure, unfiltered madness. The original crew locked in a blood-drenched orgy of murder, cannibalism, and unspeakable acts. It's like the Necronomicon threw a rave inside a submarine. Miller's response is swift. He plans to evacuate immediately and use the Lewis and Clark's missiles to vaporize the ship. Weir, however, protests, telling him that their orders were to rescue the Event Horizon, not destroy it. Weir's mask then finally cracks. When Miller threatens that he will find himself walking home, Weir, eerily calm, replies,
I am home.
And with that, he walks off into the dark like a man who just gave up on the last shred of sanity he had left. Meanwhile, Peters and Smith are collecting CO2 scrubbers from the gravity drive chamber to keep the Lewis and Clark habitable, but Peters sees another vision of her injured son and follows it down a dark shaft. She slips, falls, and plummets to her death as the apparition smiles from above. There are no monsters here, just grief, manipulation, and the ship's cruel understanding of what breaks people. Weir, not far behind, finds her broken body and is consumed by a hallucination that forces him to relive the death of his wife Claire. Through her, we learn what he refused to admit. He was never there for her, always working, always absent, until she made her pain permanent with a razor. As if to seal the psychological torment, Claire reappears, her reanimated form tenderly reassuring him,
I have such wonderful, wonderful things to show you.
In the final throes of his guilt and obsession, Weir completes his transformation into a willing servant of the ship by tearing out his own eyes. Back aboard the Lewis and Clark, things go from bad to explosive. Smith, still riding the high of getting the ship spaceworthy again, spots Weir quietly leaving the vessel. He radios Miller just as the captain discovers that one of the central corridor's explosives have vanished. Miller orders Smith to evacuate, but the stubborn pilot insists on staying to save the ship he just repaired. Unfortunately, while he finds the bomb, it goes off soon after, and he's incinerated instantly as the Lewis and Clark is reduced to confetti. Cooper, who was still doing his EVA spacewalk when the explosion hits, gets hurled into the void on a chunk of debris, but proving himself to be a resourceful technician, he MacGyvers his oxygen tank into a makeshift jetpack and begins to journey back to the Event Horizon. At the same time, Miller contacts DJ to explain that the Lewis and Clark is destroyed, and if DJ sees Weir, he's to kill them on sight. But before he can even react, Weir emerges like a jack-in-the-box from hell and ambushes him. By the time Miller gets to medical, it's already too late. What he finds is DJ's body hanging like a side of meat. In response, Miller arms himself with the nearest available weapon, a portable nail gun, because in space, OSHA compliance is optional, and he heads to the bridge. There he finds Stark unconscious, and seated before her, like a ghostly Bond villain, is Weir. But this is no longer the nervous scientist from earlier. This Weir is calm, calculated, and gleaming with the confidence of someone who's seen eternity and thought it looked delightful.
What happened to your eyes?
Where we're going, we won't need eyes to see.
Weir explains what's really happening. The event horizon didn't just vanish for 7 years into another part of the universe. It tore open a gateway into a dimension of pure chaos and pure evil. The ship is alive now. It likes where it's been, and now it wants to go back, taking a new crew with it. He then initiates the gravity drive's countdown, giving them 10 minutes until the ship jumps back into the hell dimension it came from. And then, bless him, Cooper returns, jetting back to the bridge and floating up outside the window like a surprise party guest. Weir, unamused, shoots the window, causing explosive decompression and is inadvertently sucked into space. Luckily, Miller is able to grab Stark and drag her out of the bridge just before it seals shut, narrowly avoiding being sucked out into the void. They then reunite with Cooper, now back inside via the airlock. Against all odds, 3 survivors remain.
You're okay. You're okay. It's over.
No, it's not.
With the bridge destroyed and no way to cancel the countdown, the trio decides to activate the ship's failsafe, detonate the explosives lining the central corridor to sever the event horizon into 2 parts. The idea: use the forward section as a lifeboat, go into stasis, and hope that someone finds them. And so Miller takes a detonator and sets off for the corridor to arm the charges, but nothing on this ship goes smoothly. As Miller prepares the explosives, Cooper and Stark experience another escalation in the ship's tactics. The tank is now filling with blood, as if the event horizon is staging its own elevator scene from The Shining. Miller finishes arming the charges, retrieves the detonator, and runs straight into another hallucination of Eddie Corrick. Only this Corrick is ablaze and breathing fire, forcing Miller to flee toward the gravity core, tossing the detonator as he leaps through the hatch. Inside the chamber, the ship's countdown ticks into its final 2 minutes, and the psychological torment is far from over. Captain Miller once again confronts his personal demon, but Corrick's ghost morphs into a resurrected, fully restored, and horrifyingly confident Dr. Weir, now sporting freshly regenerated eyes and the unwavering smugness of a man who's been to hell and back. Weir calmly informs Miller that the event horizon brought him back because she has no intention of letting anyone leave. Then, just to hammer the point home, Weir seizes Miller by the head and shows him a vision that would make Clive Barker blush. Vivid images of the crew being hurt in unspeakable ways. Desperate, bloodied, and outmatched, Miller tries bargaining, offering his own life in exchange for the others, but Weir refuses. As the wormhole gateway pulses to life and the ship prepares to jump, Miller slams the trigger on the detonator, sacrificing himself and denying Weir his prize. The central corridor then explodes violently, splitting the event horizon in 2 and propelling the gravity drive into a wormhole. The remaining forward compartment, now severed, drifts safely into space, carrying Stark, Cooper, and the comatose Justin. Weeks later, salvation arrives, or seems to. A rescue team boards the module and the trio are discovered alive in stasis. One of the rescuers opens Stark's pod, waking her gently. Disoriented but relieved, she asks about the others. The rescuer, removing his helmet, replies cryptically, "They're with us." But under the visor is not a rescuer's face, but Dr. Weir. Stark screams, only to wake up again with Cooper holding her down as the real rescue team floods in, calling for sedation. But the camera pulls back ominously, revealing the stasis chamber door sealing itself automatically behind them. The implication: the event horizon may have lost her gravity drive, her rear section, and her hellish prophet, but something of her remained.
They're with us.
You're with us.
Event Horizon is one of the most haunting, flawed masterpieces of late 90s sci-fi horror, a film mangled by studio cuts and yet somehow elevated by its sheer ambition and unrelenting vision. Technically, it is a triumph. The production design transforms the titular ship into a cathedral of suffering. The cinematography by Adrian Biddle saturates every frame in oppression, and the soundscape groans with organic menace. Michael Kamen and Orbital's hybrid score pulses with orchestral dread and industrial chaos, reinforcing the film's tone of relentless decay. Paul W.S. Anderson crafted what may be his finest film, a gothic theological nightmare set in the cold vacuum of space. Despite losing nearly 30 minutes of critical footage, supported by a solid cast, Event Horizon endures as a singular experience, a brutal, beautiful warning about the cost of trespassing into forbidden knowledge.
I think Event Horizon has a very strange quality about it, which is, on the surface, it's a fairly straightforward genre piece, science fiction, haunted house kind of film. But I think below that there are some very adult themes about the way the characters deal with their past and the things that really scare them. And I think that for a lot of the audience that touched a very deep nerve.
As scary as it is, you know, and however well Paul works his craft, and he does, he makes you jump and he makes you, you know, great laughs for release of tension, all that stuff. There's more than that. There's something thematically, I think, that really grabs your attention about being taken to your own personal hell.